Ancient Sumerians were more than familiar with handbags, or perhaps objects that modern people perceive as such. Several Sumerian carvings include depictions of handbag-like shaped items.
In the arid plains of Mesopotamia, archaeologists uncovered a peculiar symbol carved into ancient stone, a rigid object shaped unmistakably like a handbag. It was not an ordinary item. In the reliefs, it was carried by divine figures. Then the same symbol appeared thousands of miles away, across the Atlantic, in ancient Mexico. Even more astonishing, it emerged at sites dating back to the end of the last ice age. At first glance, the object itself seems to be the mystery, but the deeper question is not what the bag represents. The real enigma is what it was meant to contain, and the implications of that answer suggest the possibility of lost technology, a forgotten global civilization, and a history far older and stranger than we have been taught. Mesopotamia's impossible object. The story begins in what is often called the cradle of civilization, ancient Mesopotamia. In the mid-19th century, British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard excavated the ruins of Nimrud, located in modern-day Iraq. The city had once been a shining center of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, built as a grand expression of power under King Ashur-Nazirpal II, who ruled nearly 3,000 years ago. Ashur-Nazirpal was not merely a monarch, he was a conqueror whose palace walls were lined with towering gypsum alabaster slabs rising more than 9 feet high. As Layard's team carefully removed layers of sand, they revealed monumental relief carvings depicting imposing, otherworldly figures. These beings were known as the Apkallu. They were not decorative motifs, but semi-divine sages. According to Mesopotamian tradition, they survived a primordial flood and delivered the foundations of civilization to early humanity. Often shown with eagle heads or expansive feathered wings, they were said to have taught writing, agriculture, law, architecture, and science. Ancient Sumerian texts, predating the Assyrians by millennia, describe the first and greatest of these beings as Oannes. He was portrayed as a fish-like entity with human characteristics beneath his aquatic exterior. The Babylonian historian Berosus recorded that Oannes emerged daily from the Persian Gulf to instruct early humans in letters, arts, city building, temple construction, geometry, and agriculture. At sunset, he would return to the sea. This narrative of a non-human civilizer emerging from the waters forms part of the earliest recorded foundation of civilization. Back at Nimrud, archaeologists noticed that the winged Apkallu consistently held 2 specific objects. In one hand was a pine cone. In the other was a rigid, box-like container with a curved handle, a form that closely resembles a modern handbag. The object was solid and structured, decorated with intricate details. It appeared less like a simple pouch and more like specialized equipment. In many scenes, the Apkallu used the pine cone to touch or gesture toward a stylized sacred tree. Conventional scholarship offers a cautious explanation. The handbag, referred to in ancient texts as a bandudu, is interpreted as a ritual bucket. It may have held consecrated water or sacred pollen, while the pine cone, known as a mulilu, functioned as an applicator. Together, they are thought to represent rites of purification and fertility intended to bless the king and the land. For an agrarian society along the Tigris and Euphrates, this interpretation is reasonable. For decades, it was widely accepted. Yet the Apkallu were not depicted merely as agricultural attendants. They were remembered as bearers of foundational knowledge. The legend of Oannes is not simply about farming. It describes the transmission of civilization itself. If the bag symbolized anything, it may have represented the container of that transformative knowledge. A planet of handbags. The mystery deepens not because of what the symbol is, but because of where it appears. If this were solely an Assyrian ritual object, it would remain confined to Mesopotamia. Instead, similar imagery has surfaced across distant cultures and epochs. The first major parallel comes from southeastern Turkey at the site of Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is considered the oldest known megalithic temple complex on Earth. Radiocarbon dating places it at over 12,000 years old, thousands of years before the pyramids of Giza and long before Stonehenge. It was constructed at the end of the last ice age by communities traditionally described as hunter-gatherers. Yet these communities erected monumental T-shaped pillars weighing up to 50 tons and standing nearly 19 feet tall. The logistical coordination required challenges conventional narratives about prehistoric societies. On Pillar 43, 3 distinct carvings depict rigid objects with curved handles, forms strikingly similar to the Mesopotamian handbag. This pushes the symbol back thousands of years before Sumer, before writing, and before established agriculture. The pattern continues across the Atlantic in Mesoamerica. The Olmec civilization, flourishing around 1200 BCE in what is now Mexico, is often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica. At La Venta, Stela 19 portrays a figure commonly associated with the feathered serpent, later known as Quetzalcoatl, descending with a rigid, handled object in hand. The stylistic context differs dramatically from Mesopotamia, yet the container's shape is remarkably consistent. Both traditions link the object to divine figures associated with knowledge and civilization. Similar motifs appear in later Toltec imagery, where stone warrior figures hold box-like containers, even when the exact designs vary. In the Pacific, Maori tradition tells of Tane, who ascended to the heavens and returned bearing 3 baskets containing divine knowledge for humanity. In ancient Egypt, certain hieroglyphic forms and even the Ankh, a symbol held by deities and featuring a looped top, invite comparison. Across continents and cultures, the recurring theme persists, a divine being delivering essential knowledge to humanity within a special container. Conventional archaeology often attributes this to coincidence or convergent symbolism. Yet the specificity of the rigid, handled design challenges the simplicity of that explanation. The God Machine. If the handbag is more than ritual symbolism, what might it represent? Several interpretations have emerged, moving beyond traditional academic views. One possibility is literal, a seed repository. The bag held the seeds of civilization, both in the physical sense and in the instructional sense. After the last ice age, agriculture spread rapidly and appeared in multiple regions, including the Fertile Crescent, the Indus Valley, China, and Mesoamerica. In this reading, the handbag becomes a climate-protected container used to transport critical crops and the knowledge required to grow them, a kind of portable Genesis box. Another theory imagines the object as a technological device, a portable energy source. Ancient engineering feats continue to spark debate, from the movement of multi-ton stones to the precision cutting seen at sites such as Pumapunku. Mainstream history credits copper tools, wooden rollers, and coordinated labor. But some argue that such explanations struggle to account for the results. In this speculative view, the handbag is not a container, but a generator, something like an ancient battery, yet far more capable. It could have powered tools operating through vibration or frequency, or technologies that reduced effective weight, making massive stones easier to move. In that framework, it explains not only monumental construction, but also how the Olmec could have transported colossal heads through swamp terrain by floating them rather than dragging them. A more provocative idea suggests a biological function, a genetic toolkit. Some carvings show the Apkallu performing the same pinecone ritual not just on the sacred tree, but on the king. The standard interpretation is purification, but if the act is understood differently, it could be framed as modification, an upgrade rather than a blessing. In this theory, the bag carries a biological instrument set, and the cone functions like a delivery tool, something closer to a scanner or syringe than a simple applicator. This interpretation is used to argue for a sudden leap in human intelligence that modern science still debates in terms of causes and timing. In this version of the story, the gods did not simply teach humanity, they altered humanity. Then comes a related variation, a consciousness-altering device. The cone is almost never separated from the bag in the reliefs. If the bag is a power source, the cone could be the active tool. The pine cone shape has been compared to the pineal gland, a small structure deep in the human brain, often associated in spiritual traditions with the third eye, higher awareness, and inner vision. The pine cone symbol is also found globally in later traditions, including a famous ancient bronze pine cone statue in Vatican City. In this theory, the ritual sprinkling is not water at all, but an aerosol, vapor, frequency, or field designed to unlock heightened consciousness in those nearby, an engineered awakening rather than a symbolic one. And there is an even more extreme interpretation, the reality projector. In this view, the sacred tree is not a literal tree, but a schematic, an abstract map of reality itself. The Apkallu are not merely sages, they are technicians maintaining the structure of the world. The handbag becomes a device capable of stabilizing or projecting physical reality, while the cone serves as the interface, an instrument used to edit and sustain the system. In that framework, the handbag is not simply advanced technology, it is the ultimate technology, one that defines the laws of nature. The Vatican secret. For thousands of years, from Ice Age monuments to the height of Assyrian power, the handbag motif appears tied to sacred knowledge and divine authority. And then, after a certain point in history, it fades from the dominant record. One explanation is simple: the visitors left. Whether interpreted as gods, non-human beings, or extraordinary teachers, they completed their role, removed their technology, and humanity was left with stories, carvings, and symbolic memory that gradually lost its original meaning. But another possibility is more deliberate. What if the knowledge did not vanish naturally but was suppressed? If humanity discovered that civilization, religion, even biology might have been shaped by external intervention, or by relics of a prior world, it could destabilize power structures built on exclusive spiritual authority. In such a scenario, older gods could be recast as demons, symbols could be labeled forbidden, and inconvenient evidence could be dismissed as primitive superstition. In this view, scholars and institutions may have favored safe interpretations, such as ritual pollen buckets, not necessarily as part of a coordinated conspiracy, but because the alternative implications threaten established timelines and reputations. Investigating career-ending questions becomes professionally risky, and the simplest explanation becomes the most survivable one. This line of speculation often points toward the Vatican's preservation of older symbols. The massive bronze pine cone statue in Vatican City, placed in the court of the pine cone, is sometimes interpreted as more than decoration, especially given its Roman origin and connections to older religious traditions. In this framework, the pine cone is seen as a symbolic key tied to higher knowledge, while the church is portrayed as an institution that absorbed and locked away earlier mysteries within archives and inherited structures. From there, the argument extends further. Perhaps the knowledge went underground rather than disappearing. Groups such as the Freemasons, Rosicrucians, and other esoteric schools focus on sacred geometry, hidden wisdom, and the concept of a master architect. In this theory, such groups are framed as inheritors of a symbolic tradition that the public no longer recognizes. The modern military connection. One of the most startling extensions of this line of thought claims the technology may have resurfaced in modern times. In this speculative model, the handbag device, whether a power source or something even stranger, was rediscovered in the 20th century and became the basis for classified research. Some who hold this view point to 1947 and the Roswell incident, arguing not only that it was not a weather balloon, but that it may have involved technology consistent with the ancient handbag concept. They connect this to the dramatic acceleration of technological change after World War II. Microchips, lasers, fiber optics, suggesting such advances may have been aided by reverse engineering. In this framework, the handbag technology did not disappear. It became classified and controlled by military and industrial power networks, while the public narrative stayed fixed on harmless explanations like ritual pollen. At the same time, physical handbag vessels from Mesopotamia, objects that match the reliefs, sit in museums today. Examples exist in major collections, labeled as Assyrian purification buckets. But in the speculative interpretation, these could be dormant devices rather than mere ritual containers, depleted of whatever mechanism once made them significant. The argument follows that modern analysis might look for more than residue or water stains, testing for radiation, unusual elements, or unexplained traces of activity. In this view, the evidence is not hidden in remote deserts. It is already cataloged and stored beneath museum floors. The forgotten ancestors. Another theory ties the entire pattern together without requiring non-human beings at all. It proposes that the civilizer gods were actually human survivors from a lost advanced civilization, one that existed before the end of the last ice age. Göbekli Tepe is roughly 12,000 years old. That date aligns with major climatic upheaval at the end of the Ice Age, including the Younger Dryas, a period associated in some theories with sudden cooling, massive flooding, and catastrophic disruption. Some interpretations add the possibility of comet impacts during that era. If an advanced human culture existed before that cataclysm, sometimes linked in mythology to Atlantis or Lemuria, then the disaster could have erased most traces of it, but not necessarily all. Survivors might have retained fragments of their technology and knowledge. Reread the Oannes and Quetzalcoatl-type myths through that lens, civilizers arriving after a great flood, coming from across the sea, helping struggling people rebuild. In this framework, they are not aliens. They are the remnant elite of a prior world, reintroducing agriculture, law, architecture, and science to scattered human groups. In that scenario, the handbag becomes the ultimate survival device, portable, durable, and filled with the essentials needed to restart civilization. It would explain why the symbol appears across continents. It would explain why the myths repeat. It would explain why the object is always associated with authority and knowledge. It also redefines the Apkallu. They are not supernatural beings. They are remembered as gods because later societies could not comprehend what they represented. The handbag is not an alien artifact. It is a human invention, the final relic of a lost mother civilization. A warning in stone. This leads to the final, most unsettling question. If such a civilization existed, if its knowledge was so powerful, what happened to it? We have spent millennia looking at carvings of divine figures, sacred trees, and ritual objects, and interpreting them through a familiar lens. Gods blessing kings, priests performing ceremonies, farmers protecting crops. But what if that perspective is wrong? What if we have been interpreting advanced symbolism with a primitive framework? In this view, the handbag is not a seed basket or a ceremonial bucket. It is a technological core. And if it truly represented something capable of manipulating energy, matter, biology, or consciousness, then it raises another possibility. The same technology may have contributed to the ancient catastrophe that reset the world. Imagine a power source that draws energy from unknown forces. Imagine a device that bends gravity or space-time. Such technology could be world-changing and world-ending. One failure, one miscalculation, one uncontrolled surge, and the consequences could be irreversible. If survivors understood that, the repeated global symbol might not have been left as a celebration, but as a signal. Not a badge of honor, but a warning carved into stone because stone lasts. They had no digital archives, no paper that would survive floods and fire, only monuments. In that interpretation, the handbag symbol becomes a caution marker, an ancient do not enter sign for a technology humanity was not meant to misuse again. A skull and crossbones for an entire civilization. And the evidence in this telling is not confined to one culture or one era. It appears on multiple continents, across oceans our ancestors supposedly could not cross. It sits in museums, filed under harmless labels. It is embedded in myths that we dismiss too quickly as fantasy. All of it points back to a single, unsettling possibility. Our timeline may be incomplete, and our origin story may be far less straightforward than we assume. So was the handbag a gift from the stars, or a warning from our own forgotten past? Let your theories live in the comments, and if you want to keep exploring mysteries like this, remember to like and subscribe.